it's Eugene Lisho here, and welcome to Forensics Talks. This is episode 33. And before we get started today, just one really quick announcement, and that has to do with the Canadian Society of Forensic Science Conference. It's going to be coming up this June 21st, 24th, 2021. The schedule will be posted next week, but we already have a whole bunch of people who have committed to this thing, and it's looking really, really great. If you haven't seen some of the posts, which are online already, featured speakers, keynote speaker is Dr. Sherry Forbes, and she has the first human decomposition facility here in Canada, and she'll be talking about some of the work that she's doing. We also have Jonathan Hack, who is going to be talking about expert witness testimony and trying to take complex scientific concepts and then being able to present that to the jury. Dr. Bruce Badoli, he's going to be talking about advancements in forensic DNA, and he's a plenary speaker, just as Jonathan Hack is, so they have a 2-hour presentation that they'll be doing each day. And also Christophe Champeau, and so he'll be talking about it's the European Network of Forensic Science Institutes and the evaluative reporting, and so it's sort of a standard that will help people in some of the reporting. If you're interested, just head over to the csfs.ca, and then you'll see a whole bunch of information. It'll be right in your face for sure. Okay, let me just back out of these, and I think that's about it here, and we're going to get started with today's topic. So we have a very special opportunity here today to speak with Joe Bryan, who's my guest. And I have to give you a bit of background because we only have so much time, and there is over 30 years of information here, so we have to be kind of limited into what we discuss. So if during the talk here you have any questions or anything like that, feel free to comment. So if you're watching this, you'll be watching this on YouTube. You can just go ahead and type into the comments or in YouTube. So first thing I like to ask too is just where is everybody from? So you can go ahead and just put that into the chat window. Let me know where you're from, and it'd be great to know what country and city people are watching this from. So let me give some of the background here. And Joe was a teacher, actually a principal, way back when in about 1985. And this is really a story about the tragic loss of his wife. And after not showing up to her job as a school teacher at Clifton Elementary School, Mickey Bryan was found deceased around 8:30 a.m. in her home. It was Tuesday, October 15th, 1985, and it was the principal of her school and her parents that found her. She was tragically shot 4 times, 3 times in the head and once in the stomach. And at the time, Joe Bryan was in Austin. He was at a teachers conference, and this is something that he, I believe, had attended annually for like 14 years. And it wasn't close by, so this was more than a 2-hour drive from their home. And just to put this in context, about 4 months earlier, there was a young woman named Judy Whitley, who was about 17 years old, who was murdered I believe it was on the west side of Clifton, or the west side of town. And so her body was found, and nobody at the time, even shortly thereafter, for years later, was ever apprehended or found to be guilty of that particular murder. But otherwise, I would say, Clifton would be a relatively small town and a quiet town otherwise. So that's kind of the starting point for this thing. And without saying too much, because there is a lot here to go on, I'd like to bring Joe in here. There he is. Hey, Joe, how are you today?
Fine, thank you.
All right, great. Look, first off, again, I want to say thank you so much for being here today. It's an absolute just a very rare privilege and opportunity to speak to somebody who's been involved in such a complex case, and that has a lot of implications for many of us. Whether it doesn't matter which side of the justice system you're on, and even just for the general public. So again, thank you very much for being here. I want to start off by asking you about your background and even just where you grew up. So I understood that did you grow up on a farm?
Yes, I did.
Okay. What was it? Was it crops, or did you have cattle, or what kind of a farm was it?
No, we had cropland,
You
rice
do.
crops.
Oh, okay, okay, great. And how far was that from Clifton?
About 40 miles.
Well, okay, so not too bad. A bit of a ways, but
Yes, I grew up in Waco,
you grew up in Waco. Okay, okay,
which is
okay, good.
about 36 miles from Clifton.
All right. And you obviously had a big interest in teaching. Even a lot of the interviews that I've seen you, I mean, you're just it's in your blood. Let's say you're always teaching and trying to, wherever you can help, you get pleasure out of helping others. It seems. Is that true?
Yes, it is. I have a very inquiring mind. And of course, my family says I'm just nosy, but
Yeah.
that's all part of life. I like to learn things. I like to teach people. And the real reward there is when you see them finally get it, you see the aha moments that they have where they finally understand it.
Right.
And it's like a great shot of happiness and success when you see that you're finally getting the information across to whomever you're trying to teach. And
So, where did you get educated to become a teacher?
Baylor University in
Okay.
Waco.
Okay.
I
And then
majored
that.
in English.
Okay. Okay. And when did you become principal?
1972.
72. Okay, for some time. Okay. And I was going to ask you about the conference. This was you had been there for 14 years in a row.
Yeah.
And is that true? Okay. So what kind of a conference was this? Was this just like learning about
Well, it was
educational?
actually it was the high school principals state meeting, and we had speakers to come in to have programs in supervision classes on how to evaluate teachers, how to write curriculum guides, the goals and objectives, discipline problems, dealing with school boards, just anything you can imagine of in the school situation. All those issues were addressed.
Okay. Okay. And um, your wife, Mickey, was also a teacher.
Yes, she was. She taught fourth grade.
Okay. So you're like the teaching couple. You were the two
Yeah,
teachers.
yeah, she
Okay.
really liked it.
All right.
It was great.
And so um, I'm interested in the day that you went to the conference. Did this incident happen the day that you left, or was it a couple of days after, or what was the timing from when you departed?
Well, I'm not really sure when Mickey was killed. I left on a Sunday afternoon, and I was called early Tuesday morning and told that she'd been killed.
Okay, so you had already, so you left on the Sunday, you stayed Sunday night, and then Monday night, Tuesday morning, you
Yeah.
were informed. Okay, and I can imagine, was it a friend of yours, a colleague of yours that came down and got hold of you?
No, um, actually, the my understanding is that the Texas Rangers called the hotel and talked to Harold Massey. He was our executive director of the Principals Association. He and I knew each other, and he knew which meeting I was in, and he came into the meeting and called me out and told me.
Okay, and at that point, I mean, obviously, it's you're hearing sort of unbelievable news. Um, how did you make your way back to Clifton?
Well, I was in no condition to drive. The school superintendent and one of the other administrators came to Austin and got me. And some principal friends from Waco drove my car to Waco, and then two other administrators from Clifton went to Waco and picked it up and brought it back to Clifton later that afternoon.
Okay. And you just handed the keys over and said, "Yeah, I'm just going to make my way back. Yeah," and gave your car to somebody else.
Yes.
Okay. Um, I'm just showing a map here, just so people can see that basically between Clifton and Austin, it's at least 131 miles here. And on that day or whatever, I understand that, or the evening before, that the weather wasn't all that great either. It was storms and then that sort of thing going on.
Well, they had heavy rain that night in Austin. When I talked to Mickey at 9 o'clock on Monday night, we both were watching the Country Music Awards, and she told me it was raining in Clifton, and I told her it was raining in Austin. And then the weather report Tuesday morning when I got up said the Austin area had almost 5 inches of rain.
Mm-hmm.
So it was very wet.
Right. So, when you came back, and I know I have to skip over some of the details because there's so much to discuss here, but you came back, and then obviously you were, you're speaking to the police, you're speaking to the Texas Rangers, and, maybe they're asking you some questions. I mean, was there any indication at that point, or when, maybe tell us about when you got back, maybe some of the things that happened, and when you first got the indication that, hey, something is up, like where they're starting to, to look at me as a suspect.
But when we got to Clifton, the police chief, Rob Brennan, came out to the car and told me, he said, I guess you know Mickey's been killed. I said, yes, I've been told. He wanted to know if I had extra set of keys to all of our vehicles. And I said, yes, I do. And I told him where they were. I said, get them and show them to me to make sure you get the right set of keys. So we had 5 vehicles. And I'm thinking at the time, what does he need keys to our vehicles for? I wasn't really concerned about the cars. I was interested in who killed Mickey and why. And it's...
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I understand.
It's still difficult to talk about it.
Yeah, no, I can imagine.
Just looking back, you don't realize how something like that impacts your life. And one day everything is great, and the next day everything is bad. And it's an instant change. They asked me if I had talked to Mickey, and I said that I had. Monday night, I called her at 9 o'clock in the evening. And of course, the first thing she wanted was what I had to eat. I told her I'd been to the Cattleman's restaurant in Austin and had a big old T-bone steak. And she was making fun of me. She told me she'd had a bowl of potato soup. And I said, well, it's your own fault. You could have had anything you wanted.
So, at that time when you got back, who were you staying with, or who was sort of with you at the time?
My older brother came to Clifton along with my mother, and they stayed with me real close.
Okay. About how many days were the Texas Rangers in, or was the investigation going on in your home?
That I don't know.
Not sure.
They were there several days because the neighbors told me that the lights were on over there 24 hours a day. And it was probably, I was not allowed to go into the home until the next Wednesday. That's 7, 8 days later.
Okay.
And they were finally through with what all they were doing.
As I understand some of the things that happened, Mickey's brother-in-law from Florida at the time.
Her brother.
Oh, brother, excuse me. Her brother. That's right. I said brother. Her brother came up from Florida, and interestingly, or at least when I heard this, I thought it was kind of interesting. But he hired his own investigator, shall we call it, and he brought this investigator with him, or he met him there.
No.
Oh.
He. Can we wait just a second? I need to ask Sally a question.
Sure.
Supposedly, he and an investigative friend took my car out on a Saturday, and they said they found the flashlight in the trunk of the car then.
Okay. But they had the vehicle for, because if this happened on a Tuesday, so they had the vehicle for a few days?
Yes. He was in possession of my car from Wednesday morning till Sunday afternoon.
Okay. And did you know that he was bringing somebody with him?
No, he did not bring somebody with him. He called him on a Friday to come over and assist with the investigation because he was not satisfied with the way it was going.
I see. Okay, I see. So as the story goes, your brother-in-law has your vehicle, and for whatever reason, he opens the trunk. He finds a box in the trunk, and there is this flashlight. And he says he immediately sort of focuses in on this flashlight because he says it has blood on it, and so that becomes the piece of evidence, let's say, that raises suspicion, or all of a sudden has you in a bit of trouble because everybody's asking you questions about this flashlight. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And so that's 5 days after the Tuesday. And how? At what point did you know? People are asking you questions about this, where you finally just said, I mean, if something like that happens, like I'm just trying to imagine it for myself. The spouse is usually, or the partner is usually always the first suspect, right? But I mean, you knew you were away, like you were far away. You have alibis. You've got people that know you were far away. So you came back. I imagine you're feeling that's not your concern. Your concern is what the heck happened here. Let's find out what happened. Yeah. Okay. So that makes sense. But at what point, or how many days after, around what time was it where you said, "Oh boy, they're looking the wrong way. They're looking at me now"?
Well, I guess I was very naive about what somebody's doing. I didn't really realize that I was a prime suspect until they came to our family farm and arrested me on a Wednesday night. A week later.
A week later, about a week later. And did they arrest you on that Wednesday? They arrested you?
Yes, they did.
Okay. All right. I guess it's important to note a couple of other things about the items that were found in your home, because there was a cigarette butt that was found inside your home, and you don't smoke, and your wife didn't smoke.
No, neither one of us did.
Okay, so there's this sort of cigarette butt that sort of finds its way there. There were also, I believe it was like fingerprints or palm prints that were unidentified, or they weren't yours, or they weren't your wife's.
That's correct. They were on Mickey's side of the bed, on the nightstand, and on the headboard.
Okay.
Thumbprints and palm prints.
Okay. So, I mean, just those two things obviously is going to make somebody wonder, like, hey, what's going on there? It sounds like, or it looks like that there could be somebody else here that shouldn't be here.
Right.
Okay. And let's talk about what happens after that. So you get arrested, and they are saying that what was the main driving piece of it? Was it the flashlight, pretty much, that was the driving piece of evidence?
Yes.
Okay. So they were asking you questions about, why is that flashlight there? Why does it have blood on it, or whatever? Now, did they know whose blood it was?
Not at the time. They forensically tested it with what they knew to do at the time, and all they could do, they couldn't match it with Mickey's blood, but they said it was her type of blood.
Right. Is her blood type, which was it O? Is she O? I thought it was type O, which a lot of people have type O, from my understanding. So, okay. Right. Now there was obviously the first trial, and in reading some of the information that I have, they actually had quite a difficult time trying to find a motive. I mean, a lot of people in Clifton, knew you as a fairly happy couple, and you were very well known and respected, and they have to come up with a motive, so they started inventing some things. Correct?
Correct.
All right.
What they usually do is attack your character.
Right. So
they never could find anyone to agree with what their thoughts were.
Well, I was going to ask you about that, because back then, Clifton, what was the population of Clifton back then?
About 4,000 people.
Okay, so it's a small little city. Yeah, a small city, and I mean, you'd been there for a while, so you must have known a whole bunch of people. Plus, being the principal and everything, you must have known a ton of people.
Oh, yeah,
right?
sure did. And Mickey grew up there, and he graduated from Clifton High School. And she was Miss CHS and a very popular person in school and also when she was teaching.
So how did once you were arrested, how did the general public of Clifton, or how did your colleagues and friends react to hearing that? Because you had said something, and the reason I'm asking you that is I heard you say once in an interview that um, it's a small town and people want to believe law enforcement. What did
That's
you mean by that? What did you mean by that?
well, back in my time, back then many years ago, people were brought up to believe in law enforcement. If the law enforcement said it, then it was the truth. And
Hmm.
if they accused you of something, then where there's smoke, there's fire.
Right.
And I think if the same thing were to happen today, there never would have been a trial. I'd
Right.
never been arrested. Because
Yeah.
we have scientific methods today that far surpass what they could do then and be more specific about what's going on.
Yeah.
They didn't have it then. They did not have DNA testing. Um, we had to wait over 10 years for DNA testing. And then you've got to get permission through the courts to get things tested. And then when my attorneys filed motions to preserve all the evidence for future use, and then the courts do what they want to with the evidence, and they don't protect it like they should,
Mhm.
then you have people manipulating evidence, and things would just disappear, and they would show back up. Um, then when it came to the DNA testing, everything that they were saying was not necessarily correct.
Hmm. Yeah, I want to come to the DNA later because there's an interesting point there, and it had to do with the resistance to getting it tested in the first place. I mean, it's one thing when you don't have the techniques. If it was 1970 and we didn't have DNA testing, then it's one thing. But when it comes up and we have it available to us, why would you not want to test something like that where you could find something very important about a case out? So, and there was some resistance there to get it tested, and some of the reasons were pretty lame, to put it mildly.
That's correct. Um, I think this is just my opinion. Um, I think they know. I think they know in their hearts. I'd like to think that I did not kill Mickey. Um, they're reluctant to admit that they were wrong. It's going to adversely affect some careers and reputations. And since it already all ruined mine, they didn't care.
Yeah, yeah, interesting.
That's just my thoughts on that. And then when we proved through scientific methods with Philly and with other crime labs, there's no blood on the flashlight. Uh, my DNA is not on it, neither is Vicky's, but two other people's are.
Mhm. Let me ask you about the investigation. There was the investigation was sort of spearheaded by the Texas Rangers, and I believe the person's name was is it Joe? Is it Joe Wiley or is it
Joe Wiley's correct.
Joe Wiley? Okay, so he was the main person. They're running the investigation, and then for whatever reason, they say we're going to call in another detective with the Harker Heights Police, and that was Robert Thurman.
Robert Norman.
Oh, okay, Robert Thurman. Okay, so Robert Thurman was yeah, Thurman. So he's the one they call him in, and he's looking at the bloodstain patterns because this was there was a significant amount of blood, so they call him in, and he's going to do an analysis on the blood, and he testifies at your first trial, correct?
That's correct.
All right. And he testifies about the bloodstains on the wall. He testifies about the flashlight. Um, what other things did they ask him about?
Angles, how close the killer was to Mickey, what kind of spatter they would be there if that took place. Would the person who killed Mickey have blood all over them? Would they track it all through the house? distances, angles.
Hmm.
They went into quite details about what he thought was correct at the time.
Okay. Now, Robert Thurman was an experienced investigator, but he was not an experienced bloodstain pattern analyst. So, to put this in perspective, he had just received some training or his first 40-hour basic bloodstain course. I can't remember the exact timing, but it was a few months before.
That's correct.
Okay. So then he goes there and he's providing opinions on the reconstruction and what happened and everything else. And unfortunately, without getting too involved in this, he said some things that were simply just not true. He wasn't using a scientific method. Uh, it was just wrong. And unfortunately for you, as I understand it, the bloodstain evidence was very important. And you were at trial, so did you realize that how important the bloodstain evidence was?
No, I'm totally unfamiliar with bloodstain patterns and how things work on that. I thought it was, I listened to what he had to say and watched the way he did it. And who am I to say he was correct or not correct at the time? I don't have any training in that area.
Right.
And I thought, well, whoever killed Mickey had to have had blood all over them from what they described.
Right, right. So yeah, because and when they're describing this, you're saying, "Hey, I wasn't there." So yeah, maybe whoever, maybe these are things that happened to whoever was there, but it wasn't me.
Correct.
Yeah. But to put it in perspective, especially for the listeners as well, basically, I mean, there were four shots or four injuries, and he took 5 stains that were on the wall, and he tried to basically reconstruct this event with a minimal amount of stains, and not only that, but just he did everything incorrectly. He went far beyond what the science at the time could even provide, but somehow it was enough for the jury.
Well, he embellished his description of everything, and he was convincing to the jury. And again, you have to look at the time when you have people in a rural area. They like to think, I think for their own state of mind, that if someone's coming into a trial and saying something, then what they're saying is all true.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And it's not.
So, did the cigarette butt and the palm or the prints come up at the first trial?
That's a long time ago.
Yeah, I'm sure. I know it is.
We discussed it. We wanted to, of course, they didn't have DNA working at the time. They were eventually checked. All they could give us was the type, blood type, or whatever the person was. The other stuff was basically, in my mind, just conjecture.
Mm-hmm.
They had no basis to support their theories or how anything was done.
And actually, so you got convicted on the first trial, but then it was overturned.
Yes.
And so what happened there?
The court agreed with us, and again, it's been a long time, and I don't want to give you incorrect information. They said they remanded that back to the court for retrial, so
Okay.
they could either drop the charges or they could retry me.
Okay. So during that time, did you get out of prison for a short time?
Yes, I did. I bonded out for 16 months.
Okay. And they were obviously preparing a second trial, and then at the second trial, what was different about the second trial versus the first trial? I mean, both sides had time to prepare, or maybe was it different? Was one side stronger than the other?
Well, evidently so. On that, the prosecution side had a better leg to stand on, I guess, because they'd already found me guilty once, and we asked for a change of venue. I wanted it like 150, 200 miles away from the area where nobody was familiar with me or the case. And the judge agreed to change the venue to a town about 80 miles from Clifton because it was in the same judicial district.
Right. Okay.
And it was the same thing. It was just a recap. And as one of my neighbors told me, they use the same railroad to get you to time too.
Right. And again, the same players were there. Did they bring anyone new in, or was it pretty much the same players?
It was the same.
It was the same players. Okay. So Robert Thurman again came back on the stand. He talked about the bloodstains again. He talked about what had to happen. And again, it was this flashlight where they're saying basically what happened here is that your flashlight or this flashlight is in your car. And they're saying that the only way it could have gotten in your car was, obviously you're the prime suspect who would have had it.
You see, we proved the mileage on my car and where I bought gasoline too. And that was just like them waiting when we'd only hear that. We're going to say this happened, which did not happen like that.
Mm-hmm. What do you think happened with the flashlight? I mean, so just so I heard, and again, you can clarify this, but this was a flashlight you kept in the house.
Yes, we did. Our house was at the very edge of town, and we had, at that time of the year, trouble with rattlesnakes and copperheads. And I also had a vision problem at the time. Mickey would go out and kill when she's changing the water and the sprinklers stuff at night, there'd be a rattlesnake or a copperhead on the sidewalk, and she'd kill the snake. So we used the flashlight for that. Plus, I had cornea problems and had difficulty seeing at night. So I would, if I had to get up during the night, then I would use the flashlight, go around the house. I wouldn't turn on lights and wake Mickey up.
Okay. So where did you normally keep the flashlight?
We kept it on one of the nightstands there by our bed.
Okay, so
if I was there, it was usually on the nightstand by me, and if I was gone, Mickey kept it on her side of the bed.
Okay, so it was easily visible. Anyone who walked in could have easily seen the flashlight.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Okay, so it would have been in the room when this incident happened.
I would think so, yes.
Right. Okay, so that's what I'm saying. It's in the vicinity or whatever. Okay, but somehow it ends up in the back of your car. And now, do you have any thoughts? Obviously, the car was out of your possession for some time, and well, I guess it begs the question too that, and this has come up before, but if you had driven back to your home and then committed a crime and then gone back to a conference and had evidence in your car, you probably wouldn't be so willing to give your car to somebody.
No, I wouldn't let anybody get close to that car if I'd been guilty.
Right. Okay.
I'd be scared to death. There might be some blood inside it because what they said, whoever killed Mickey had blood all over them. And if I had done it, I would have had to have cleaned up. And I can't. It blows my mind to even think about it. What I like to have to do. Plus, then you've got to drive back to Austin. And what if you get stopped for a driver's license check, or you have a wreck, or you get caught in traffic, and you can't get to your meetings in time?
Mm-hmm.
So ridiculous.
Yeah, but in fact, that's what they were trying to say that you did. They were trying to say that, and there was also this implication. I'm not sure. I don't know if you can shed any light on this part, but they kept saying that the crime scene was cleaned up. Somebody cleaned up, or somebody did something.
That's what we were told.
Okay.
And of course, they checked the bathroom and the sink and everywhere else to find blood residue and never found any. So I don't know.
Okay. So the second trial, you're convicted again, and it's back to prison. And obviously, you've been there for a very long time. And I don't know what was going on through your head, but were you? I mean, you must have been at some point just angry.
I was. When I had to go back into, of course, I was mad the first time too. But the second time, I was really upset. I had a very good job there at prison. Um, I was thankful for that because it used my thinking processes. Uh, I did not go to church. I didn't tell anybody I was a Christian. Uh, I'd been active in church since I was a teenager. I started playing the piano full time when I was 13 years old in our church. So I've been a Christian and very active in church for many years.
Hmm.
And when I had to go back the second time, I just decided I wasn't going to church. I was mad at God. And our chaplain at the time called me one day and told me he'd like to talk to me. And I went over to the chapel when I got off from work. And I mean, the first thing he says, I understand you play the piano. And I said, well, where did you hear that? I hadn't told anybody. He said, well, I want to hear you play. Okay, so we go into chapel. I said, what song do you want me to play? And I just sat down and played by memory the songs that he asked me to play. And he asked me if I would. We got back to the office, and I said, "Really? Now, how did you know that I played the piano?" And he'd received a letter from my high school principal, and Paul Ellis had led the singing at our church where I played, and he had written to the chaplain of TDC and said that he knew I was hurt, angry. He had known me since I was 5, and he and his wife had been Mickey's by home many times. And he says, we believe Joe's innocent, and if you can help him, it would really be good. So he asked me if I would play the piano for the church, and I said, no, I will not. And I told him, I said, I'm mad at God. And in his wisdom, he said, will you think about it tonight and tell me in the morning? Well, I got no sleep that night because the Holy Spirit was all over me. It's just like a parent talking to a kid. Well, who do you think gave you that skill? Who do you think takes care of you? And you're not willing to do this for me? So I had two
Wow.
choices: yes, I would, or no, I would not. And when Chaplain Pickett got to work the next morning, I called him and told him I would play, and that
But
made tremendously.
in again, I brought up the point before about the fact that you're a teacher by nature because you were helping to teach people in prison as well, correct?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
Um, I taught or tutored guys with GED, and I tutored also the young officers who were going to college. And I would jokingly tell them, um, on this paperwork, I'm the, I'm the boss. You listen to what I say. And if you're not willing to do what I say you need to do to correct your papers, then don't talk to me. So I'm not going to disrespect you. I respect what you're trying to do. You have a tough job. But if you want me to help you, then I'm treating you like a student.
Hmm.
And it worked out well.
Yeah. During the time that you were in prison, there were people still looking at your case. I mean, there were still people who were, looking at it every now and then, going, "There's something wrong here. Like there's something just isn't right." And
There was always that talk.
mhm.
Um, Even the staff in prison said, you're just not like anybody else in here. You stand out like a sore thumb. And they would tease me. And some of the kids I ended up being friends with would always tell me, you're not like anybody in here. And I thought, no, and I'm glad I'm not. uh, but you make choices. And my choice was the Christian path. And that's where I've stayed.
Yeah. Well, can I talk about, or can I ask you about some of the more recent things that have happened, and I guess maybe in the last, let's say like 5 years and that sort of thing, because obviously there has been. I mean, well, let's talk about. Actually, let me ask you about parole first. So, I mean, you had. What was your record like in prison? It must have been
Squeaky clean.
as squeaky clean as can be, I imagine. Yeah. Okay.
I had no cases. Uh, in fact, one of the pro board members asked me, "How can you be in prison as long as you've been and have no case?" And I said, "Well, I live by your rules and your regulations, just
Hmm.
like you wanted me to." I said, "I can do the same thing on parole."
Right.
They think
But
they think when you can be in prison, not get cases, that you're manipulating the system. which I did
Your
not.
case came up. You came up, or you had a couple. It was it. I don't recall how many opportunities you had, but there were a couple of opportunities for parole,
Yeah,
and they were denied. What were the reasons for them?
seriousness and nature of the crime.
Hmm.
And you, from their viewpoint, I was convicted. You got to be open-minded enough to realize that they're acting based on what the courts have decided. And most people think all inmates lie, and they don't. Um, what's really telling is how you live your life every day, and how you work with people and what you say.
Hmm. And the final on the final sort of round for parole, what was different about that one? Was it just the time, or were there other factors as well?
I think it was the time, and I think it was other factors too. Um, the fact that we'd had the evidentiary hearing, and we proved, in my mind, and a lot of other people's mind, beyond a reasonable doubt, that I did not kill Mickey. Um, also, John Grisham, the novelist, was very supportive. Came to visit me in prison and wrote a nice letter to the parole board. And people who had thought that I was guilty were beginning to look at it in a different light based on the information that was presented at evidentiary hearings. And the big help for us in evidentiary hearings was a blood splatter testimony from Ms. Rossi.
Right. Now, when Shelley Rossi testified at the hearing, I should mention something as well. The Bloodstain analyst, which was Robert Thurman, he signed an affidavit saying that his conclusions were wrong.
That's correct.
You had that in your hands at that time, did you not?
Yes, we did.
Okay. So, and
Evidentiary hearing, we had it.
I have an excerpt of that, and I wanna see if I just want to read it for people. This is he said in an affidavit. He said my conclusions were wrong. He says some of the techniques and methodology were incorrect. Therefore, some of my testimony was not correct. And this was read aloud on the stand by actually Shelley Rossi, and I think she had previously challenged the accuracy of Thurman's analysis. And I'll tell you what, it's an interesting point that has sort of interested me more lately, having to do with forensic experts and what happens when they make mistakes. And I'll give Robert Thurman one one little thing here, and that is that he had the courage to actually write that and sign it.
Well, he had to do that, or he was going to get subpoenaed, testify in open court.
Okay, so maybe it was the lesser of two evils. Is that what you're suggesting? Okay, okay. Well, yeah, I don't know what the circumstances were, but I'm glad that that has happened, because that's something that is very difficult to get out of a forensic expert, and it raises a big issue in sort of the justice system. And you know, Shelley Rossi and I have had this discussion before, and the analogy we make is of a train, and the justice system sort of is very good at moving, you know, forward with heavy stuff, but when there's a mistake found, it's almost or impossible to stop those wheels turning and then go backwards and fix the mistake.
They're reluctant to admit that they were wrong,
Hmm.
and they will sacrifice me or anyone else to uphold what they thought at the time.
Right. Yeah, no, for sure. Um, what's the status of your? I mean, you're on parole right now, so you still have to report in, or what's your situation?
Yes, I have to parole in. I'm still on house arrest. Um, I can leave the house one day a week for 8 hours at a time, and I have to try and schedule a month ahead of time where I'm going to be going.
Okay. Do you know, is there still something in the works here to try and get you exonerated for what's happened?
Well, in my mind, there is yes, but the Supreme Court has denied our petition. So anything from this point would have to be through the district court again. Uh, and I can't see them working with us unless there's something that really, eyeball opening in what they can't deny.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The I mean, of course, we have DNA analysis, and during the time there was a push to get the items of evidence that were found tested for DNA, and we brought this up, and I thought this was an interesting point as well. But the prosecution tried to block the testing.
Yes.
Okay, so what were you part of that process as well, or was it just something that happened in the background while you were in prison?
No, the Texas Innocence Project, working through Walter Reeves and Jesse Freud, were working on that. Um, Personally, I'm unwilling to not test everything. I think we need to do everything possible because you never know when you're going to find that DNA that's going to really open it up. It's
Right.
just like when they check the DNA stuff on the flashlight, and my DNA is not there, neither is Vicky's. So the flashlight's not our flashlight, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any thoughts on who might have been responsible for your
Yes,
wife's murder?
I think it was Dennis Dunlap. He was a former police officer there at Clifton. And in 96, when he committed suicide, he told his wife that he had killed Judy Whitley, the high school girl, and that he was with my wife the night she was killed. And the courts posthumously convicted him of killing Judy Whitley, and then the other information was kept from us for almost 30 years.
Was kept from you?
Yes.
Wow. And he was a police officer, and he told this to like a partner of his or something. He was bragging about it or something.
He told his wife that, and then he said he was afraid he was going to get caught, and he said he just could not live in prison. He said they would kill him.
Right.
So he hung himself in his garage.
Were there for example, other women, for example, who were suspicious of him, or?
Yes. He had stalked them, followed them around, threatened them. So Nikki had never said anything to me, and I don't for 1 minute think that she would be interested in him. But she was the type of person physically that he liked to be seen with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow. And was he a resident? Was he raised in Clifton as well, or was he?
No, I think he was from Ohio originally.
Okay. And how long had he been with the police there?
I don't really know. I would
Okay.
say a couple of years probably.
Okay. So they have a suspect now, potentially. That's interesting. Now, I wonder if there would be any possibility of DNA. Of wondering if they could figure out if it was his DNA. I don't know if he has any children or anything, or something that they could do there. But that would be kind of interesting if you could tie some loose ends back up there. Yeah, I'm not sure where to really go from here. I mean, you really told your story, and we've talked about the forensic evidence, and I really wanted to focus in on the bloodstain pattern analysis. This has come up before. We did another episode with David Cam, and I don't know if you're familiar with his particular case or not.
I'm not.
Okay, well, David had a similar situation to yours, where an expert, talked about the bloodstain patterns that were, involved in his case, and it caused a lot of grief, a lot of problem. He spent nowhere near as long in prison as you. He spent 13 years, but he did lose his wife and 2 children as well. And it's a very, very sad case. But eventually, he had 3 trials, and on the 3rd trial, it was overturned. He was found not guilty, so he was released. But again, I think the real troubling part was and this has got to be. I think this is something I want to address again. Maybe I should invite some prosecutors on to get interviewed and just talk about the justice system, because it's something that I don't understand very well, and that is this tendency to. And I don't know if you felt it at all, and maybe you can comment on it, but almost like pressure to move in a direction, and often use just circumstantial evidence or things that are really not scientifically founded to really push in a direction, and with great bias, with great bias and using logic that you would never use anywhere else.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Um, there was a lot of pressure and stress in Clifton to find who killed Mickey, because they had not convicted Dennis Dunlap of killing Judy Whitley yet. And so people were still very alarmed about that. And then when Mickey was killed, and it was almost like when I got convicted, like, man, we're safe again and we don't have to worry about it. And they were so focused on the happening, they were not looking at the reality of it, how it affected Ashley, her family, and me. We all lost someone we loved dearly. Uh, I have a lot of compassion for the Blue family for that. Uh, but once they got me convicted, it was like, sure, man, we've done this and we're over and we don't have to deal with it. So everything's back to status quo.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there was a grave injustice done when I was convicted. And a lot of people obstructed justice to get me convicted. And that's the part I really don't like.
Yeah.
I would like to think, and not everyone has the same values that I have, that if you're going to be testifying or you're presenting evidence, you're honest with what you do, but you still have to live with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Because I guess if you don't really have a conscience, it doesn't make any difference.
Yeah, that's true.
It's alarming to me that courts and judges and district attorneys and policing departments can do what they did to me and legally get away with it.
Mm-hmm.
And there's something seriously wrong there. And I'm not against policing agencies or Texas Rangers or the justice system or district attorneys. All I want is the truth.
Do you think that? I mean, I can't fault a person for making a mistake. People will make mistakes. The justice system is based on people, and so people can make mistakes. But I think, do you feel like if somebody is honest to say, look, I think we screwed up here, and you can come back and you can undo the wrong, then I think there's a lot you can tell about a person, how they behave, or a system, how it reacts when there is a flaw and how it recovers from that flaw. And obviously, there's a big problem with the justice system. I mean, I'm here in Canada, but it's it's the same sort of problem, and in many places around the world, I think it's the same problem.
I think so too, and that's to me very alarming because they're interested in conviction and not justice.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that I know with kids at school, if the kid had been in trouble at school and they came back to the office, with another problem, I didn't discuss what they'd done before. We dealt with that issue, and you have to put all prejudices aside, and you've got to look at exactly what's there. And sometimes, if I was wrong, I would say, "Hey, I messed up. I'm sorry I did that. Let's get this changed and corrected." It's
Right.
hard for me to accept the fact that people are willing to falsify police reports, manipulate evidence, lie on the witness stand, avoid subpoenas, whatever they do, and then no one holds them accountable.
Mm-hmm.
Yet they won't accuse me of something, and I can prove I wasn't there.
Yeah, it's true.
I'm 80 years old. I'll be 81 in September. I have nothing.
Mm-hmm.
So I've lived a lifetime for what? I mean, you
Oh,
look at it as from a social and human standpoint.
yeah. Well, let me ask you, what are your plans? I mean, you're sort of, are you trying to advocate? Do you just want to put everything behind you? Like, what do you want to
Well,
do?
you have to deal with it every day. You cannot live a life of anger and revenge. like one of the preachers that I like to listen to, he says, get over it. It doesn't mean you have to forget it, but you've got to move forward, because I can't be a positive person and be the kind of witness I think that Jesus Christ wants me to be if I'm still mad and screaming and yelling about all the injustice that's done to me and to Nikki, because it's not just about me, it's about Nikki too on this. So I chose to, okay, this happened. I've got from this point on, I've got to be the right kind of person.
Right.
Which I always was.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what. We're getting a little bit on in time here, I'm noticing. But what I'm going to do is in the chat window here. First off, let me ask if anybody out there has any questions. I'd be happy to take some questions. But I'm also going to put a few articles, links to articles that I think talks about Joe Bryan's case and a lot of the details. There's a lot there to really find out about the kinds of things that happened to Joe and his case and everything else. I'll give them a plug. It's from ProPublica, and they I believe her name is Pamela Koloff, and she did a really good job of writing up a lot of the information with Joe. And actually, I think Pamela met with you. Is that correct, Joe?
Yes. Yeah, multiple times.
Yeah. So it's really unfortunate. And I've noticed that in some of Pamela's discussions, let's say, or whatever, she sort of comes down on bloodstain pattern analysis, but it's really not. I really feel like it's not about this, the sort of the science that's surrounding bloodstain pattern analysis. It's the fact that the science wasn't used at all. It was used incorrectly, and unfortunately, it's kind of like bringing your car to the mechanic, and if the mechanic doesn't know what the hell he's doing, but he's not going to fix your car. And you don't blame the engineer or whatever. It's just he doesn't know what he's doing. So it's kind of the same thing here too, I believe. But I think we're going to leave it at that. I want to say again, very, very appreciative of your time and being able to share your story. I hope that somehow, the courts are going to have a second look at your case and finally, get this resolved and not just leave it hanging.
Yeah, I'm not quitting.
I hope not. You shouldn't. And at this point, you definitely shouldn't. And I know there's a lot of people like Charlie Rossi and some of the other the defense people who have spent quite a bit of time on your case because it was just the right thing to do. So, kudos to them. I would thank them as well for all their hard work and all their efforts as well. But hey, look, all the best to you. Again, I'm going to keep following your story. I want to hear what happens, and I wish you all the very best going forward.
Thank you, Operator, and thank you for your interest too.
All right. Yeah, I'll this may come up again at some point in the future, and I'll just point people your way. So, look, have a great afternoon, and hang back. I'll come back and just chat with you when I'm done.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Joe.
Yeah.
Oh, actually, just a second. Somebody just asked a question, and let me put it up here. And it says, could Mr. Bryan say a few words about cooperation with people from the Innocence Project?
Okay, so they're talking about my cooperation or other people?
I guess people from the Innocence Project. What kind of people, or how were they involved with your case?
They provide funds and attorneys to help with Innocence, with people like me. Without their help and their assistance, we wouldn't have been able to do what we did. The Innocence Projects in every state is a magnificent project, and there are many men and women in prison who are innocent, and they're begging for and hoping that someone will take their case and help them, because realistically speaking, I spent everything I had on defense, and there's nothing left, and it's a fact on that. So without the Innocence Projects all over the United States, a lot of innocent people will never get any help that they really need.
Mm-hmm. Was there a particular person that you worked with on the Innocence project?
Walter Reeves and Jesse Freud and Mike Ware.
Okay. Oh, Mike Ware too. Okay. Well, shout out to them. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I
Allison Clayton.
Allison Clayton. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, a shout out to them for their efforts. And thank you for the question as well. I have a feeling that's Casper from Poland, but I can't tell for sure, but I believe it's Casper. Um, all right. Well, look, Joe, thanks again. Hang back. I'm just going to say some closing comments, and then I'll chat with you in a bit.
Okay.
All right. Bye-bye. All right, folks. Well, that does it for this particular episode. Very interesting and really raises a lot of topics that maybe we need to take a hard look at the justice systems. We have to look at ourselves as forensic experts and really consider the impact of what our conclusions have on people. This is people's lives, and looking at how things can get better. But on that note, I think we're going to leave it there. Next week, looking to be back, and I hope to see you all again. Have a happy Thursday, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.